It was a given that Kibaki would have wished to succeed himself in 2007. And so all these things that, we sum up as reluctance were, I think, an attempt by him and his handlers to figure out how he fits into the picture, because he definitely had done very well between 2002 and 2007, despite, of course, the divisions in his coalition and stuff. And so that is the context. I like placing everything into context. And of course, being a politician, he was also, mapping out how to succeed himself.
Right. And
overall, I think that, yes, he may have been perceived as reluctant, but he facilitated the process, gave resources, because such a process required a lot of resources. We remember the Yashpal Gai Commission going around. I remember, just before he took over, I remember there had been two parallel processes. There was the People's Commission, where we were allied. I was personally at the Fungamano, with a parallel process going on under the late Oki Ombaka as the chair. Then on the other hand, there was the formal and government, facilitated process under Yashpal Gai. And so when Kibaki, as we approached the 2002 elections, there was this feeling that we needed to merge the two processes. The Fungamano process had the legitimacy, the support of the people, but lacked the legality. So how would you ensure that the product you have at Fungamano becomes law? You'd need the government. The government side had the legality and the resources, but didn't have the legitimacy. So they were also desperate to have the two processes merge. And I remember, a day-long meeting at Fungamano House where, some of us were resistant to the idea of merging the two processes. Yet, behind the scenes, Mutava Musimi, who was, the titular head of the Fungamano process, knew very well that he lacked the resources. The commissioners were not able to move as efficiently as they would have done to collect and collate views from the public. So he really wanted this yoke removed from his shoulders. And I remember Kibaki coming and, endorsing the idea of merging the two processes, because as a politician, I think it was more practical than those of us who are activists and who are just merely idealistic and wanting to demonstrate that we can do it on our own, with or without the support of government. And so when Kibaki came and he gave his thumbs up for the merger, it did happen. And so we can say that there are certain critical roles that he played that ensured that the process continued to its logical conclusion at the Bomas, and even later on, when it got picked up at the post-election violence and so on. So by and large, he was part of that process. He may have, in the course of it, as a politician, naturally been figuring out what his role will be and how it will impact on his presidency. I remember when we convened at Bomas, and there was this push to create the position of what, in my view, was a very powerful prime minister. And yes, initially everybody agreed, but now when it came to at what point that this office does this provision come into force? And remember, he had been given a mandate as president, head of the state and government, and then we were creating this position at Bomas where the prime minister would take away the head of government part and leave the head of state to a president who had gotten an express mandate from the people. I think these were some of the dynamics that played out and made Kibaki look like he was not, a very enthusiastic, champion of the new constitution and so on. But when it finally came, we must also give credit to the late president for presiding over the setting up of various institutions. The Charles Nyachai Commission that was in charge of ensuring that, the enabling legislative framework that was necessary to ensure that the Constitution becomes a reality, because the Constitution spells out the principles, the values, but the how is normally left for ordinary legislation. And there was a raft of, laws in the 5th schedule that Parliament was expected to, enact, and he, as the president, give his thumbs up for any law. I mean, sent it so that it becomes law. And so we credit President Kibaki for, you know, ensuring all that is done. The setting up of independent constitutional commissions and independent offices that today have played a very significant role in improving the human rights situation in the country and ensuring that the requisite checks and balances in the executive are there to make sure that we do not get overboard in terms of, you know, being drunk with power. Because without those constitutional commissions and independent offices, those powers would naturally be exercised by the executive. Right. And so you'd end up with a presidency that people would call imperial and so on and so forth, and autocratic. And so part of the role, an important role that all these independent commissions and constitutional offices play is to take away the power that would ordinarily be exercised by the executive.
Decentralized.
And so for Kibaki to have ceded that, one thing people forget, and I think this is where Kibaki's legacy, and I said it is multi-layered. Kibaki inherited power under the former constitution. Remember, with all the powers that Moi used to exercise.
Yes.
Under the former constitution, President Kibaki was the chancellor of all universities. He refused. That was the law then, because each university had its own, statutory regulatory framework, and in each of those universities, whether it was the Egerton University Act, the University of Nairobi Act, the chancellor, the president of the republic, would become the chancellor. When Kibaki took over, I think he only allowed himself to be chancellor of the University of Nairobi, I don't know which one, and left the others and said, let each council, appoint their own. So if he was power hungry, he would naturally have thrown his weight in the style and manner that Moi used to do. But Kibaki refused to do that because he really wanted a situation where he had less power to, to exercise and give himself room to be able to exercise very critical, functions and affairs of state that were instrumental in the growth and expansion of the economy. You did mention earlier about Vision 2030. When people talk about Vision 2030, you really need to peel off each layer after another and realize that within Vision 2030, there were flagship projects. The Thika Super Highway we talk about is a flagship project within Vision 2030. Today, people look at the University of Nairobi and see the University of Nairobi Towers. That is a flagship within the Vision 2030. If you look at the phenomenal expansion of Kenyatta University, complete with a referral hospital, all those are flagship projects within Vision 2030. So all those flagship projects, and they are all over the country, including what is coming up at the Kenyatta National Hospital. You must have been seeing a construction that is underway. It is within the context of Vision 2030 and the East African community, where each of the member states are putting up something with respect to health. And I think ours is on cancer. In Rwanda, they have a similar project that will be on, things to do with kidney and stuff, and Burundi and Tanzania the same. So all those are flagship projects that are being undertaken within Vision 2030.